Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you the top 5 plugins I use on every mix. We are talking about plugins today, but before we dive in, if you want to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process and you want to start honing your workflow, then I have just the thing for you. This is my 7-step mixing checklist. It is a simple PDF that will guide you through the entire mixing process, step by step, to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without the hassle and without the guesswork. It is completely free. You can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's talk about my top 5 plugins I use on every mix. The first plugin that I use on every mix is actually the stock Pro EQ inside of Studio One. So I'm going to move over here to the drums and we're going to solo up our drums here on the track. So take a listen to our drums and we're going to dive into the kick and the snare drum here, and I'm going to show you how we're using the Pro EQ to our advantage and why it's a plugin that shows up on every single one of my mixes here. Take a listen to our drums. The reason I love the Pro EQ inside of Studio One is because it is so flexible in terms of crafting sounds. If we take a look at our snare drum here, our first EQ here, we have a couple different moves, right? We have a nice high pass filter here, which is something I love about the Pro EQ. I love that there's a high and low pass filter built into it in addition to the 5 bands we have to work with. And then our Q can go all the way up to 24 to be something really narrow like this. So if there is a frequency, a specific frequency that I need to carve out and get rid of in my mix, I have that ability to do that with this EQ, but I can also be very broad and very gentle with nice little slopes like this to boost frequency ranges, like right here. We're doing about a half a dB at 1.75K. Same thing later on with our snare drum, right? Gentle moves, gentle, broad moves, in addition to another high pass filter here. And if we look at our kick drum, same kind of thing, right? There's a frequency that's bothering me here in the middle, so I can use this EQ to get really surgical and really precise to pull out that one frequency, but I can also be very broad and pull up the top end to give the kick a little bit more air and a little bit more snap. So let's focus in on the snare drum here, and I'm going to show you some of these moves. I'm going to boost up this frequency, show you how we can pull out one exact frequency, and also give our snare a little bit more mid-range or a little bit more top end. So here's our snare drum. So there's a little bit of ringing there on the snare. This is one of the great things about the Pro EQ. You can find that ringing, find that overtone, and pull it out. And in addition to being really surgical like this, we can also boost frequency ranges. So say we need a little bit more snap here, a little bit more top end air to our snare drum, we can go find that and boost it up. The flexibility that this plugin allows to me is one of the reasons it always shows up. It is the #1 plugin that shows up on every single one of my mixing sessions. Plugin number 2, my second plugin here that shows up on every one of my mixes that I use all the time is actually, again, the stock compressor inside of Studio One here. You can see it's on our kick and on our snare here. We're going to start with our snare drum, and I'm going to show you why I love using this compressor rather than I could reach for like the vintage 1176 or the Neve 33609 to put a little bit more snap, a little bit of vintage characteristic on this snare. But I love, 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 love the stock compressor inside of Studio One for my kick and for my snare. I love this compressor on drums because of the flexibility it gives me, the adaptive setting on the attack and release, how wide of a range I have for my attack and release. I have a side chain here if I need, makeup, input gain, threshold, ratio, and I have control over the knee on this compressor. So take a listen to our snare drum here and notice our attack and release setting. So with this compressor, I have the ability to set my attack and release, totally customizable there, right? We don't have audented ranges to select from or certain ranges to select from. Complete control over both of those. We can go insanely fast, insanely slow with either. So it gives me the ability to set my attack in the right place to allow that snap to come through on the snare when I compress it. And then my release, I have the option to keep it a little bit slower, keep it where I have it at 100 milliseconds, so I have some of that back end of the snare come through. Or you saw I could pull it up there to 2, 3, 400 milliseconds and keep that compressor holding onto that snare longer to get rid of some of that back end and get it a little bit snappier. Ratio, I have complete control. I can go from 1 to 1 all the way up to 20 to 1. So nice range there. Same thing with the threshold. And we have a mix knob if I want to mix between the dry and wet signals. So I could completely annihilate the snare drum and then pull the mix knob back to mix between them. So let's do that. So we squashed our snare drum now, right? We are doing like 9-10 dB of compression. It's pretty snappy, but we lost a little bit of the low end, a little bit of the weight of our snare drum. So what we can do is we can pull our mix knob back to get a little bit of the dry sound back. Now we have the best of both worlds. We have that weight and that authentic sound from our dry snare drum, and then we have the snap, the attack from our compressed or our overcompressed snare drum. This is the reason that I love using this compressor, and then it shows up on about 100% of my mixes, especially on drums, is because of the complete customizable control I have over all of the components, the attack, the release. I have a mix knob, the ratio. I can go anywhere I want with this compressor, and I can make sure that it's tailored to the sound of the instrument, or specifically here, of the drum. The third plugin that I use on every one of my mixes, I'm going to set this back where it was. Cool. The third plugin that I use on every one of my mixes is the 1176 or the FET style compressor here inside of Studio One. I am a Studio One user here. You can probably tell I do love my Studio One plugins. I believe this comes with Studio One. I know a lot of the other vintage style plugins don't, but I believe the FET style compressor does come stock inside the FAT channel now. But I love this compressor, especially on vocals. I will use it a lot on piano. It is here on, I'm clicking in the wrong place. It is here on my piano track. I love it on piano. I love it on acoustic guitar, but especially on vocals. To absolutely slam my vocals into this compressor and get all that character, all that vintage vibe, and to emphasize the personality of the performer, there is nothing like it. Let me show you what this compressor is doing to our vocal. I'm going to solo up the vocal here, turn off the reverb so it's a little bit clearer. Take a listen. I'm going to A-B this compressor. Listen to, of course, the evening we get of the sound, right? It keeps our vocal in place, keeps it up front, keeps it aggressive, but we also get an enhancement of the personality of our performer. It keeps them in place, keeps them up front. We get a little bit of edge from the vintage vibe of this compressor, and we emphasize their performance. Here's our vocal.
One step, and it's much too far. I'll take 2 steps. We're way too close, but take 3 steps. And I'm into your arms. I'll do all it takes to get to your heart. One step, and it's much too far. I'll take 2 steps. We're way too close, but take 3 steps. And I'm into your arms. I'll do all it takes to get to your heart. One step, and it's much too far. I'll take 2 steps.
The vintage vibe and character of this compressor is just, to me, it's otherworldly. I love pushing vocals into this compressor, especially 7 to 10 dB of compression on a vocal. Really brings out that character, really brings out that little bit of edge, that little bit of push and pull that you want to hear on your vocal. It enhances the character of the performer, but it can also be a little bit more subtle, like we have here on our piano. You could do just, 1 to 2, 3 dB of compression. So in addition to holding instruments in place like acoustic guitars or piano, just touching them down when they have some peaks, it can also be nice and aggressive like on vocals to enhance some character and enhance the personality of the performer. Where are we at here? 4? The 4th plugin that I use on every single one of my mixes, this is built into my template actually, is the SSL style bus compressor. This is, like I said, built into my template. This comes loaded up when I pull up a mix template. It is the bus compressor or the mix bus compressor on 100% of my mixes these days. And I don't touch it. The settings that come up on this in my template are the settings that stay exactly the same. So it's at negative 1.6 dB on the threshold, 30 millisecond attack, 100 millisecond release, 2-to-1 ratio, and then there's a dB of makeup gain because I'm usually only pushing 1, 2, maybe 3 dB of compression with this unit. It's just touching the mix to glue everything together a little bit. Let me do an A-B here on the mix bus compressor. So we'll play the entire mix and you can hear and see what our compressor is doing for a mix.
One step, and it's much too far. I'll take 2 steps. We're way too close, but take 3 steps. And I'm into your arms. I'll do all it takes to get to your heart. One step, and it's much too far. I'll take 2 steps. We're way too close, but take 3 steps. And I'm into your arms. I'll do all it takes to get to your heart. One step, and it's much too.
It can be subtle and it can be not subtle. It's just a little bit of loving on the entire mix. You see we're doing about 2 to 3 dB of compression there, really hitting our kick drum and our snare to hold those in place and give the mix the weight it needs to push and pull and be aggressive when it needs to and pull back when it needs to. That's what I love about this compressor, especially the effect it has on the low end. And it has a key filter here on the side, so if we are pushing too much of our kick drum into it, we can roll that filter up if we need to, and we can filter using the key as well. So just a little bit of push with this compressor, 2 to 3 dB of compression, and it gives us a nice sound on our kick drum and a nice sound on our snare. We get a little bit of that low end back. It gives us a little bit of punchy weight down there on our kick drum. I just love the sound of it. I love how it glues the mix together, binds all our instruments together. That is why it is always on my mix bus. 4th plugin I always use there. Number 5, our final plugin of the top 5 I use on every mix, is the next plugin on my mix bus. This is another one that is built into my template. It is the only not stock plugin I use on my mixes these days. It is the Soft Tube Tape Machine. I use it pretty much the stock way it shows up. I just push the color a little bit more from 5 to 5.1. I use it on the B type, and I have it on the 30 IPS tape speed, the 30 IPS. We're usually just sitting, I think, between about 7, 5, and 3 here on the VU meter. And all this is doing is giving me a little bit of that analog tape 5. And on the B type here, it really does some good loving on the low end. It gives it a little bit more power, a little bit more weight to our bass guitar and our kick drum in the mix. So take a listen, and I will A-B the tape machine for you.
One step, and it's much too far. I'll take 2 steps. Way too close, but take 3 steps. And I'm into your arms. I'll do all it takes to get to your heart. One step, and it's much too far. I'll take 2 steps. Way too close, but take 3 steps. And I'm into your arms. I'll do all it takes to get to your heart. One step, and it's
So not a lot there. You can see we're sitting between the -7, -5 range here on the VU meter. So it's not a lot of processing. We're not pushing very hard into it, but it's just enough that we get a little bit of weight, a little bit of blooming in the low end on our kick drum, and especially here on this mix on the bass guitar. It gives it some nice, big, lush low end. It helps our kick and our bass connect and be the powerhouse of this mix, of the low end on this mix. So there you go. Those are the top 5 plugins I use on every mix. We have the stock Pro EQ inside of Studio One, the stock compressor inside of Studio One, the 1176 FET style emulation from PreSonus. We have the Fat Channel, the SSL bus style compressor from PreSonus. That's another one of their vintage plugins. I believe that doesn't come stock in Studio One. That's something you have to purchase or add on. And then top 5, the 5th one here is the Softtube tape machine, another plugin I probably can't live without these days. It always goes on my mix bus to give my mix that little bit of analog tape vibe, that little bit of enhancement. I hope that was helpful for you all. Like I said, if you are ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow, then I have the tool for you, and it is 100% free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist. Download it below and start creating more professional sounding mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.